You're listening to True Crime PI, an investigative podcast that explores unsolved, missing, and unidentified persons cases from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
In the United States, there are more than 200,000 unsolved, missing, murdered, and unidentified persons cases. In order for justice to be served, these cases need to be shared. So what are we waiting for? Let's solve a cold case. Welcome to True Crime PI. I'm your host, Dana Pohl, and you are listening to Part 3 of the life and disappearance of Lonene Ray Raffle Rogers. In Episode 2, Alison told us what happened the night her father left her at the police station and drove away. Again and again and again, the agencies tasked with protecting Lonnie's children failed. Fortunately, the Dinsmore family stepped in and rescued Alison. But unfortunately, Aaron was made to endure his father's abuse for 5 more years. In Episode 1, Aaron shared his theory on what he thinks happened to his mother. He believes that his father choked her and disposed of her body in a way that, quote, he is confident no one will find her, unquote. We also heard Glene explain that in a fit of anger, Bud pushed her to the ground and put his hands around her neck. She recalled the look in his eyes as, quote, something she had never seen before, unquote. Aaron saw that look in his father's eyes many times. The last time he saw it was on his 17th birthday, when he says his father put his hands around his neck and tried to kill him.
Ultimately, on my 17th birthday, his abusiveness got so bad that he tried to kill me, basically. He had his hands around my neck and was choking me. And I think if his girlfriend at the time, Marie, wasn't there, it might have been a different outcome. I might have been another victim of his.
This was the last time that Bud would ever lay his hands on his son. Here's Glene explaining what happened next.
Bud got a restraining order, big, strong, over 200-pound Bud, and at the time, Aaron was, a skinny, knock-kneed boy. Bud convinced the judge to give him a protection order.
It has been almost 27 years since that restraining order was issued. Aaron has moved on and started his own family. I asked him what he would say to his father today if he had the chance.
He's a, violent man, and when he gets angry, he can, fly off the handle in an instant, and, he could have his hands around my neck real quick. So, if we were face to face, we would definitely need to have somebody else, some other people there. But I would like to say, I know you killed my mother. You choked her to death, wrapped her in a blanket. What did you do with her? Maybe if somebody told him, and that is actually what happened, maybe that would trigger something that he would finally break down and admit it. I doubt it, but that would sure be great if we could get some closure on this, and he could be held accountable for it after all these years of getting away with it.
In April of 2021, Alison began her crusade to bring her mother home. When I interviewed Alison in August of 2021, she was frustrated and disappointed with how the Pennsylvania State Police were treating her. She felt that they were ignoring her questions and rolling their eyes at her requests. This lack of transparency and empathy was making it difficult for Alison to trust the investigators assigned to her mother's case. For this reason, Alison decided to take matters into her own hands. After receiving a tip from a member of the deaf community, she and Glene requested Bud's arrest records from Erie County, and what they discovered will shock you. Bud had a secret, a skeleton in his closet that no one knew about. Not Lonnie, the Raffle family, the original detectives, Child Protective Services, or the current investigator. The records revealed that in 1970, just a year before Bud met Lonnie, he was convicted of aggravated sexual assault and battery with a weapon and sentenced to 27 months in prison. Just 6 months later, he was released on good behavior. Listen as Alison and Glene explain how they discovered the arrest record.
There was a woman whose husband committed a crime with my father in 1970. And in 1970, this man, who is now this woman's ex, committed a rape. He and my father were followed a college girl back to her apartment, and they were actively raping these two women, and my father was doing it at knife point. So they were screaming. Somebody must have reported it to the police. Now, of course, these two men are deaf, so they wouldn't know how much noise is being created. But apparently it was enough for a neighbor to call the police, and the police caught these two men red-handed in this crime. I never knew this happened. I never, ever heard this story. So this woman, who's the ex of the man who committed this crime with my father, sent a message saying my ex was the one who was involved in this crime. Now, of course, I feel like this can't be true. So I asked the police to look it up and tell me if it's true or not. And I then also file through public records, through the clerk of courts, which any individual has a right to do. It's all public records. I requested the records, and sure enough, it was absolutely true that he had committed this crime and was in jail.
It just blows my mind. I can't believe the police didn't find it out. I asked one of them, I said, how is that possible? And I'm looking at how he did it. And Nicole the cop says to me, well, you'd be surprised. Different counties don't like to share information. But I still don't understand why they didn't check him out and say, hey, this guy's got a bad rap sheet. He was just a bad guy. All the time that he kept custody of his kids, nobody ever knew what he had done to a 21-year-old college kid. I don't know. He's had people on his side. I just shake my head. Most people, I think it's easier to just give in to him and get him out of my sight. Go. That's what I think. And they ought to be ashamed. They should be ashamed.
Armed with this information, Alison began to reach out to local newspapers and television stations. Each time Lonnie's case was covered, the reporter contacted the Pennsylvania State Police for comment. And finally, on July 30th, 2021, 40 years after Lonnie disappeared, in an interview with Erie News Now, State Police investigator Nicole Ludwig publicly named Bud Rogers a person of interest.
For many, many years, they refused to call my father a suspect or even a person of interest. When I asked why that is, when there's so much circumstantial evidence that would point to him, I was told, it's all legal and they have to be real careful about putting labels on people and that sort of thing. But to my surprise, when they interviewed the investigator, she specifically called my father not a suspect, but a person of interest. And that is the first time I have ever heard them say that.
For the past 18 months, Alison has been collecting and investigating tips and leads, organizing searches and sharing her mother's story. After I released the previous episode in April of 2022, Allison's adopted dad passed away. As you can imagine, this loss was difficult for her. Allison took some time to grieve and enjoy the summer with her family, and then in late August, we taped the following interview.
I want to talk to you about what has happened since the last time we have actually recorded audio. And that is going back to last August when I came up and you took me to the place where you felt your mother's body may be. With that, I am really interested in getting a picture of what has happened in the investigation and the work that you have done on your own to further the investigation.
Sure. I will say that I have worked nonstop. From the time that we spoke in August of last year, I had started the Facebook page called Justice for Lonene in June of last year. And at this point, there are currently over 4,100 people on that page. So one of the main things I have done is really, really worked hard to get exposure for the case. I've done several podcasts, yours being one of them. I've done speaking engagements. I've talked to anyone and everyone I can think of, shared the story, asked the story to be continued to be shared. I've written a book, and that has been released. I've been touring with that book, telling the story. I've really tried to make people aware. This was a story that really was, it was a cold case, and it was a story that people didn't know about, much less talk about. A lot of people I shared this story with are local to the area and couldn't believe they never heard this story. So now the story is being talked about. It's gotten more exposure. It's been in the paper. It's in the newspaper. It's been online. It's been on national true crime pages. So I think it's touching a lot of different areas. I know that there are far-reaching areas of members on the Justice page. Nigeria, I've got members in South Africa, I've got members in New Zealand, Australia. It's amazing to me how much support and how far-reaching it has spanned. As far as the police investigation portion, I continue to, in my mind, it's every 2 to 3 weeks I make a call to check in on how they're doing, what they're doing, and just reminding them that, we've got to move on this case. We've got to keep the momentum going, keep working, keep trying, keep searching. And at this point, there have been some new investigators assigned to the case. They have, I'm happy to say, been much more communicative with me. That does not mean they share information. That just means they're willing to talk to me, which I feel is a very nice positive change from the old investigators that were involved. So as far as how they make me feel like I'm heard, I'm listened to, and they're open to conversation with me. They won't tell me much of what exactly they're doing because it's an open investigation and they don't want to compromise it. And I can understand that. I just want to continuously hear, we're working on it, and we're following any and every lead they can. And from what I hear, they are, even though they can't tell me. So I really just trust and pray that they really are doing the work. And as I said, I just continue to spread the story, spread the news. And I feel like my piece in this puzzle is exposure and sharing the story, getting it out to everybody and anybody that could possibly give me an idea, a lead, a resource that could help in this case.
So it's awesome, truly, that you feel these new investigators are hearing you and communicating with you. It's such a nice change from, when we spoke last. I'm glad to hear that. That has to, and the fact that the Justice for Lonene page has exploded, but not on its own, through your very diligent work. I see, your posts, and I see how you welcome everyone who joins, and you go out to other pages and share the information. So you're doing an amazing job and working so hard to gain that exposure. And what's different about, and I don't want to, we're going to talk a little bit about this, but what's different now is that it seems like you feel like your role has shifted a little bit to exposure, sharing.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's nice, because that's something you can control and you have the power to do.
Yes, very much.
But going back to we'll hit a little bit more on the police investigation. Have they done anything that you know of or you can speak of that has moved the investigation forward in your mind?
I know that they have, ideas for things they want to follow through on and things they want to follow up on. I do know that they've talked to a lot of people within the deaf community or people who are connected to the story. I do know that they have, I'll say, have you talked to this person? Have you talked to that person? And, they're able to say, yes, we have. Now, they can't tell me what the conversation was, or even if they found anything, substantial in the conversation. But the fact that I'll bring a name to them and say, you really should talk to this person, or what about this person? And they can say, yes, we followed through on that, or no, we didn't. It's helpful to me, at least encouraging, that they can tell me that, they have done that. As far as, leads and things that they're doing, they don't share those things with me, but they'll tell me that, we're pursuing, a certain location, but they won't tell me the location, which I understand, because they can't compromise the case, and I don't want that. I just appreciate that they're telling me that there is action right now. And then when I call in 3 weeks, I say, hey, how did that lead you were following up, work out? And, they'll say, well, it didn't pan out. Or they'll say, well, we're still working on that. But I don't get specific details. Again, I understand why. But I truly appreciate that they're willing to say, yes, we are working on that. Yes, we followed that through. Yes, that was a positive lead. No, that wasn't a positive lead. Just enough generic information to let me know that they are still working the case.
So I think that you bring up something super interesting and something I have, believed for a long time. And I think it would benefit so many families if more police departments were able to do what these investigators are doing. Absolutely. They are being as transparent as they possibly can. They are not making you feel like that you're bothering them. They have open communication as much as they possibly can, which makes you trust them, number one. Exactly. And it also makes you respect them. So you're not beating down their doors saying, you need to tell me this information, because they are sharing as much as they possibly can and being very open and being very kind in, in answering those questions. So I think that would, transparency doesn't have to be complete. It just needs to be
pathetic.
Yes, exactly. So,
well, and in a former interview with you, I did share how disgusted with the police I was because I felt so mistreated and so just disrespected. I would ask a question and say, well, did you ever, for example, the cadaver dog topic? And I would say, why can't we get cadaver dogs out there? And I got snide responses and kind of we can't just send dogs out, and there's a manner in which you talk to victims' families. They're not the perpetrator, they're victims. And, they just want their loved one to get justice, and to be treated so disrespectfully. It makes a very negative and bad taste when you're already hurting. So the fact that this new investigative team is willing to listen, willing to share what they can, speaks volumes for a positive relationship between us and them. You know, it's not so adversarial like us against them. It's more like we're trying to do this together as much as we can, as best as we can, and we're respecting each other. So we all move forward feeling positive about what's being done. And that's the way it should be.
Absolutely. It creates hope for you to think that they are moving toward maybe finding a resolution in this case and that justice could be served. And then there's also your words now are giving hope to other families who might listen to this podcast because they may be dealing with a situation similar to what you were dealing with, and your situation has changed for the positive, and that's a wonderful thing. So it can happen. You're not always stuck with the same investigators. You know, sometimes they bring in someone who wants to communicate more with the family and to be more supportive. So that's a wonderful gift that you are now giving to other families, the hope that can happen in their cases as well.
Now, that's an interesting topic because you said other families. So over this past year, I have been absolutely amazed at how many cold cases are being solved these days. I mean, 30 years, 40 years. It's on my justice page. People will find it all over the country and beyond, and will repost these cold cases that are now being solved. And I just keep praying. I mean, it's so encouraging. And I just keep praying like mine will be next, you know, and then I've had the beautiful opportunity through the Uncovered website, organization that you're a part of, like families through there that they're searching for their loved ones and saying, hey, what did you do? And it's been such a neat connection. What did you do to try to get, you know, awareness? How did you get, you know, different things done, and how did you move in different ways? So it's kind of like also developed as like a support system among families. You know, that justice page has kind of collected a few different families that are on the same pursuit that I am. And we've been able to talk, you know, in private message and check in on each other.
Yes.
So neat, the connections that are being made.
Absolutely. And I mean, just you being able to share what you've learned and others being able to share what they've learned to help one another. It's just this wonderful network of support. And, you know, I can see that happening every day on your page.
Yes, I'm so proud of it.
You should be.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that you did independently with the cadaver dogs, with the location, all of the effort and time and all of the people that came to support you in those endeavors. If you could talk a little bit about what you did do on your own.
It is just mind-blowing. You know, I started this justice page. It's called Justice for Lonene. And, you know, it was intended to kind of get the word out about my mother's case and, you know, to spread ideas, awareness of what's going on. And little by little, I would have, you know, different members of the group message me with ideas, with resources, with thoughts. And so I started to really, I pledged when I started the group that I would offer as much transparency as I possibly could on this page, because I feel like the lack of transparency with this case is why we're at year 41 and no answers. So on this page, I said, you know, I pledge as much transparency as possible. I want to talk about this. I want to do everything I can to try to promote more awareness. And what has happened is people have offered their own skills, their own ability, their own resources. For example, out of frustration, I posted on the page that I asked the police to enlist cadaver dogs in this one area that we were given an idea that my mother could be there. And I was told by the old regime, not the current detectives, we can't just spend money that way. We have to have more information. We have to have an exact location. We can't just send them out. And I was really frustrated because I felt like, well, how in the world would we know an exact location without using cadaver dogs? That's how you narrow it down. We don't. And I posted that frustration on my justice page, and I got a private message from a woman who had her own cadaver dogs, and that she works with a rescue organization and works simultaneously with the police. So that all came from the justice page. So all of the cadaver searches that took place were not enlisted by the police. They were enlisted through the justice page by a woman who was willing to offer her canines to come and help search. And they've come 3 or 4 times now, and every time that the dogs have come, there's 2 different women who have come with 2 different dogs. They've entered the dogs at different points in the area. They've not gone in the same time. They don't go together. They've gone in the spring, winter, fall, and summer, every season, and every single time they have alerted to the same exact tree stump. To fast forward a little bit, after getting this affirmation, I posted that, does anyone have an excavator? Does anyone have equipment? And people responded right away. Hey, one gentleman said, I own my own company. I'll come help you. I'm not far from where the location was. I had him bring his own equipment and come and help us excavate that particular area to see if we could find anything substantial. I had people messaging me saying, hey, I have metal detectors. I'll bring them in. Another gentleman said, hey, I'm part of a metal detecting group. We'll all come out and help. And they gridded the area. I was there for every one of those days. And we searched like that whole general radius where that location was. Now, as of yet, we haven't found anything substantial through my efforts or anyone connected to me, but we're absolutely not done searching. But those are all people that volunteered their time, volunteered their resources, their efforts, everything, in the rain, in the snow. It's just amazing.
There are so many people that want to help. There's so many people who say, I have the resources, or I have the skills, or I have the knowledge, and I want to help. And what we're doing, and you mentioned Uncovered, and what we're doing at Uncovered is we're creating a community of people much like what you've created on your Facebook page. And, there's experts from all over the country in, forensic psychology. There's librarians like me. There's, we have DNA, people that do genealogy and investigative genetic genealogy. I mean, we just have people from everywhere who want to help with these cold cases. I mean, when you say there's 250,000 cold cases in the United States, it's a whopping number. And there is no way that, police departments can handle all of the work that needs to be done on hot cases, as they call them, and balance cold case loads. So I think that is where what you created comes in. That is where what Uncovered is creating comes in. We're just trying to be a resource for families and a resource for law enforcement so that they can find the support they need. And maybe we can bring them the information that might actually be able to help solve a case. So
to add to those special people, there's a specific cold case investigator who's been talking with me and consulting with me about different ideas and things to look into and helping out. There's a private investigator who has volunteered his time, answering questions, giving advice. And my brother-in-law is an attorney, and he has also been helping out a lot in trying to get access to the file. At this point, they have not allowed me to see the file. And my perspective on that is, I mean, you never know what dots I can connect. I mean, I was 5, I'm little, but I might remember, something that could help match things, but they're not able or willing to share that with me. And I think a lot of that is because it's still what they call an active investigation. I'm not sure how we call it active after 41 years, but they do. We have fought and fought. We're currently in our 4th appeal. 3 have already been denied, but we're all the way to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania at this point. And hoping that, we can get access to that just for the possibility of connecting some dots and moving this case forward. But again, that's another person volunteering their time and helping in the fight because they're passionate about what we're trying to do. And that's find my mother.
I'm glad you brought that up because we have talked so many times in the past, let's just say year, aside from meeting each other last August, and then we've talked multiple times. Life has gotten in the way, but I was with you through the beginning of this process with your brother-in-law, who is amazing. The approach
Absolutely.
that he was taking with this was ingenious, in my opinion.
I agree.
And so, yeah. And so,
don't tell him that, but I agree.
Yeah. And I do realize it's been a fight. You've had to do appeals, but you are trying to utilize the Freedom of Information Act, and there are sunshine laws that are getting in the way of that. They're saying it's an active case, and we don't want to jeopardize the case. You and I had talked about H.R. 3359, which is the Homicide Victims' Families' Rights Act, and it was passed at the federal level. And this is an act that will help families, if they're federal cases, they will be able to request reviews of the cases along the way. They will be able to have testing done along the way instead of it sitting cold for 41 years. So
right.
It's a positive, of course, in cold case investigation. We want to see this happen at the state level. Alabama's working on it. New York is talking about it. Georgia's working on it. So we have some states that are taking the lead, and it's an exciting piece of legislation. And I hope for states to look at it and pass it to help families, so that we have some kind of system for cold cases to be reviewed in a certain number of years and for the file to be released after a certain number of years. I do commend your brother-in-law for the work that he has done, even if they utilize the sunshine laws to say no. In my opinion, he has thought about this in a way that I don't know that other people have, and I'm super impressed with the work that he has done and what everybody has brought to the table. So, but once you had the excavator come in and you had the dogs come in and they've hit 3 times in the same area, and Easter weekend, you videotaped big event happening at the site. So how are you feeling now? Like, where does it stand? And do you have plans for any further work at that piece of land, or are you just in a holding pattern?
So a little of both. I'm not done with that area at the time of the excavation. All of the people standing around in the pouring rain, umbrellas, mud, and they were excavating the exact tree that the dogs continued to alert. So we had them literally, and I filmed it all because I wanted, evidence. If we found anything, it was all on camera. And I, again, pledged transparency, so I did it. Now, in that particular excavation, we didn't find anything that looked unusual or suspicious in any way. But I will say that we had the dogs come back out again after that. Now, the tree trunk was literally lifted and kind of spun around in an effort to get to the root system, and the dogs alerted to the trunk, not the hole. So when they came back after it had been moved, the dogs went to where it was moved to. Now, they're hemlock trees, and hemlock trees grow laterally. So I guess it's my belief that there's a really good possibility that she is somewhere in the root system. Fortunately, most likely very much, decayed and probably not much left of her. My hope is that we can get a forensic team to study this soil and see if there's any type of human remains in that area. If a dog can smell human remains, there's got to be something that science can do with that. And so that's where I'm at.
So right now you're just kind of in a lull. You're thinking of ways and maybe planning things that you'll be doing in the future. But what you have been doing since you released the book, I believe was in February, somewhere around there. Okay.
February 7th.
And I know I've mentioned it in the podcast several times, but I would like you to tell me about your book and then tell me about what you've been doing this summer.
Sure. So the book was released. It's called A Daughter's Journey and Story of Resilience. Again, like you said, it was released on February 7th. From the moment it released, it's a self-published book through Amazon. So the burden of publishing and marketing is on me as the self-publisher. So I was looking for different, ways that I could offer the book to people. So I started to set up book signings. So I went to coffee shops and kind of made flyers saying that I would be there if anyone would like to purchase a book or bring a book that they already purchased for me to sign. And when I was doing these different events, I started booking them at libraries, at clubs. I went to a Lions Club. So then the more I did that, the more I realized that there's a whole nother purpose for this book. And one is, of course, to find my mother and find justice for her. But the other piece is more a piece of honoring her and honoring her in me and focusing on what positive came from this book and this story, and that is resilience. So I started just giving short little talks at book signings, and then that turned into being asked to come speak, like a 20, 25 minute talk on the case and how things were going. And that kind of spiraled into a resiliency talk and talking about, look what my mother went through and what she endured and the things that she overcame so valiantly in her life with being deaf and just never accepting I can't for an answer and finding a way to my life and inheriting that drive that she had. And also for me, being one who never said no and never said I can't. And when people said, you'll never this or you'll never that or you'll never amount to anything, it was almost like fueling that for me, saying, oh yeah, just watch. Here I am, this child of the system. I was in foster care. I was told I'd be pregnant by the time I was 16. I'd never graduate from high school. And here I sit as, that child of the system. Not only did I graduate high school, but I graduated with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I am a special ed teacher, 22 years now, and now I'm an author. So all of those things are spun from the resilience, the gift that I got from my mother. And now, not only am I booking book signings, but I'm booking speaking engagements. So I'm spreading not only the story of my mother and the sadness and trauma that went with that, but I pray that I'm delivering a message of resilience, of hope, of healing to other individuals who have had to experience anything similar to mine, or even if it's not, but connecting with that same trauma and pain that I lived through, and am now rewriting that negative story as a life-giving, healing, positive message. So it turns all of that ugliness into something so very beautiful.
Every single time you say that, in the multiple ways that you have said it, I literally get goosebumps. It's inspiring. It's just like the resilience is obvious in you. The last episode was very heavy. It was really getting into what you and your brother experienced and what you had to go through, and the injustices of that, from the fact that your mom was missing, from the fact that your father acted the way he did, from no one looking deep enough to figure out who he was or what his past looked like and whether or not he should have custody of his children. And then being put back in the home multiple times by services that were supposed to be protecting
again and again.
To hear you say what you just said is just one of the most inspiring things. And so I'm super excited that you're out there sharing your story. I'm one of your biggest fans, and you know that.
Thank you.
Truly, because you're just an amazing person. If you want to tell everyone where they can buy your book.
So I self-published through Amazon, and you can find my book by either typing the title in or my name. So my name is Alison, Alison, and the last name is Diker, D as in dog, Uiker. Or you can just type the title in. It's called A Daughter's Journey and Story of Resilience.
Thank you for catching us up. It's been quite the journey. I'm going to be, I'm excited to be releasing this happy ending, if you will. We could look at it as if we still don't know what happened to your mom, or we can look at it the way you're looking at it, and that is, I'm honoring her. I'm doing everything I can to help solve this case. I'm providing exposure, and I am sharing her gift, the gift she gave to me, with the world.
Absolutely.
I want to end this 3-part series the same way I started it. Lonnie was Lonene Ray Raffle before she became Lonene Ray Rogers. She was smart, she was kind, she was a loving mother, sister, daughter, and friend. She believed in doing what was right. She faced difficulties with grace, and she had zero tolerance for excuses. Lonnie loved her family and had hopes for a happy life. Lonnie's disappearance has affected the lives of so many. Without Lonnie, her children suffered. Her sister was robbed of her best friend, and her parents passed away, never knowing what happened to their beautiful firstborn bundle of joy. Lonnie deserves justice. Alison, Aaron, and Glene deserve justice. If you know anything about the disappearance of Lonene Ray Raffle Rogers, please come forward. Contact the Pennsylvania State Police, Troop E, at 814-332-6911. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, like our True Crime PI Facebook page, and join our Facebook group to discuss the case featured in each episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a minute to rate and review it. Ratings and reviews attract listeners and ultimately result in more exposure for these cases. Visit my website at truecrimepi.com to suggest a case, and if you're feeling generous, click on the Buy Me a Coffee link to support this podcast. Thank you for listening.
True Crime PI is written and edited by Dana Pohl. Theme music, CD Streets, and Come Out and Play, written and performed by the very talented Darren Curtis at DarrenCurtisMusic.com.